Didn't do my usual cuckoo cuckoo in the comments, but I was dilly dallying doing something else. So I'm just getting myself comfortable, and then we're going to get stuck into today's lesson. Sheila is on as well. That's what I like, a nice turnout. There we go. Let everybody jump on board, and then we're going to get stuck into today's lesson, which is going to be all about creatine, or fundamentally creatine monohydrate, and benefits to weight loss, or certainly things to consider. Other than that, I'll give it another 20 odd seconds because people are jumping on board now, and I understand there is a bit of a delay. So we're going to go through the lesson first. I'll give you as much information as you can, and then, as always, if you can then ask your questions afterwards, that'd be great. Remember the rule of thumb: if you have a question, come in, write QI as quickly as you can, and then take your time, write your question, and then I can hold off for you. Okay, so today's lesson is on creatine, which is typically short for creatine monohydrate. Now, there are different types of creatine, but the most common one is creatine monohydrate. You might um, you might have heard of creatine, maybe if you've ever gone into a health shop. You might be looking along the kind of supplements. You'll typically see your protein powders, and then you see this stuff called creatine. You think, oh, what is that? What's it for? So I'm going to delve into what it's for. And the age-old question is it beneficial to weight loss? I'll give you all the information, and then you can then make an informed choice. So creatine, there's different energy systems in the body, and there's an energy system known as the creatine phosphate system. Now, in your standard Krebs cycle, right, if you studied your anatomy and physiology, there is our fundamental energy source is ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. It's three phosphates, right? And when we exercise, we move, we do anything, even me flap my arms around like this, I will be expending ATP. Okay, now your body will replenish that, and it allows you to continue functioning as you go. Now, if you start doing rigorous exercise, you can imagine that you'll use a lot of ATP, and therefore to continue to operate at that rigorous level, you're going to need those energies replenished faster. And this is where creatine phosphate comes in, because when ATP delivers its payload, it loses one of its phosphates. So when it does the chemical reaction that creates the energy, it loses a phosphate. Now, the creatine phosphate system, which is going to be, well, refers to roughly the first 10 seconds of any exercise, creatine is a sort of molecule, like a carrier that donates its spare phosphate, because it's creatine phosphate, donates its phosphate so that it speeds up the process of replenishing your ATP by giving it one of its phosphates, if you like. So by supplementing in creatine, you then maximize more of your creatine phosphate molecules to be able to faster recover or faster perform in the first 10 seconds of every movement. So the kind of sports that will benefit from supplementing ATP is anything strength-based or explosive. Now, as I said, the first 10 seconds of any movement will utilize the creatine phosphate system. So a 100-meter sprinter, assuming they're sub 10 seconds, is going to vastly benefit from supplementing creatine. Weight training, you're going to, for other reasons, but ultimately, even just from the energy system perspective, weightlifters are going to benefit, because when you're lifting weights, your set might take you, specifically if you're doing strength, might only take you 20 seconds to complete, right? And therefore, the first 10 of that will benefit from the creatine phosphate system. So, athletes for the last probably 50 years, maybe more, um, found that by supplementing creatine, adding more creatine into their system, they found huge significant benefits to their performance. Now, you need to remember that creatine is naturally occurring in the body. You can also get creatine in red meat and other food stuff. So they found that people that were consuming large amounts of red meat were getting more creatine into their system anyway. The supplement you buy in the shop is a more condensed, focused version of it, and then that increases the levels into the body. Now, historically, there used to be two ways to take creatine. There used to be what they called front loading it, and then just daily intake. Now, there's creatine has been, oh, vastly studied beyond anything else in the supplement industry, probably beyond protein shakes as well, to be honest. Um, and there was a period of time that the chain of thought was to front load it. And what that meant was you used to take a lot of creatine for 1 week to pack your muscles full of it, and then you used to go on to a daily kind of dose. Now, the benefits for that is that it got your creatine levels up to their maximum much, much quicker. Okay, so for somebody doing a strength training routine that decided they're going to take some creatine to help their workouts, they would front load it and it get into their system quicker. And after a week, their creatine levels are full, and then off they go. But the problem with front loading it, people found, is it tended to upset the stomach because creatine, when it's getting processed, then denatures into creatinine and it's quite toxic on the kidneys. Now, they've debunked the whole damage to the kidney myth, but for your GI tract, your gastrointestinal tract, your stomach, it doesn't like all that powder coming through. Let's be fair. So that all comes down to if you got a sporting performance goal, then you might think about front loading it. But if you have any sort of GI issues, you might just go to the standard daily dose, right? And standard daily dose is roughly 5 grams per day, and then gradually over 2 to 3 week period, you'd eventually build up to levels in the body. Now, creatine itself, when you take it, it increases the volume of water in the muscle cell. Now, muscle cells are filled with water anyway, right? So when you then increase the volume of water in there, apart from the energy benefits as well, it then increases the size of the muscle. So you can imagine that if you were a strength lifter or a performance-based power athlete, being taking creatine means you will put on a little bit of weight with it, water weight, with the swelling of the muscles. And therefore, if you are then wanting to be stronger and heavier, because some sports like rugby or NFL based sports, if you start off weighing 200 pounds and you get up to 220 pounds and you can run just as fast and are stronger, you are more of a tank or more of a force. The physics are there to bring down. It pays to be heavier and faster and bigger, stronger, faster, basically. So creatine does increase the volume of water in the cell. Now, I will get to the weight loss side of things in a moment. I'm just trying to paint the scene, if you like. So, creatine increases the water in the cell, so then the cell does grow. But the key things to creatine is the performance base, what you're able to do within the workout, and it has then been linked to muscle growth afterwards based on the recovery. Now, why would you take creatine? Creatine for any athlete or any sporting person will allow you to get more out of your workout. Why? If your workout is power based, so if you're lifting weight, when I say power, you don't have to be lifting heavy weights, but if you're doing any sort of resistance based work, you're going to utilize the creatine phosphate system, as I said, the first 10 seconds. So even if you're following a HIIT workout, right, you're going to utilize the first 10 seconds of your jump squats is going to utilize or take benefit from the creatine phosphate system. So by having more creatine in your system, you're going to be able to work harder and recover faster within that workout. People or certain sports that wouldn't benefit from creatine would be like marathon runners, right? In terms of their performance, their sporting performance, because a marathon runner, when they start their run, they'd use a little bit of creatine, and then after that, they would go into the aerobic, or if they're running really fast, anaerobic energy systems. Their performance in the moment does not get benefited by creatine. So that's why athletes would choose creatine if they're doing any sort of sports where they've got to throw something, anything where they've got to explode and be fast or lift a weight, that kind of stuff. They will benefit from creatine. So then the question is weight loss goal. Like if you're on a weight loss goal, should you take creatine? And this is a really interesting subject, and I've got a very specific view on it. So to be nice and clear, I'll refer to myself and then you can make up your own mind. So, when I'm trying to lower my body fat, I know that I want to train harder, right? I want to get as much training in to build lean quality muscle as I can, right? So, in the early stages, I do not mind taking creatine. I usually take creatine at the start of my training regime. The reason I do this is I know that, right, I want to get the most out of my workouts. If I'm doing my bench press, I want to get those extra reps. I don't want to fatigue. I want to recover faster. I want the muscles to have that little bit of oomph so that when I make the time for my workouts, I feel at my best, I'm stronger, I'll get those extra few reps in, I'll have a better workout. So let's just say I was dialing in for one of my posy photo shoots, right? In the beginning, for the first 8 to 10 weeks of that dial in, if it was a 12 to 14 week schedule, right? Or if you're going on holiday 14 weeks down the line, you could take creatine up to 10 weeks at least. You can take it all the way, but I'm going to explain why I don't. So when I get up to that point, the reason I take the creatine is very, very simple. I get more out of my workouts. If I wasn't pushing myself in the workouts, I wouldn't bother with the creatine. It's wasted on me then, right? Because of the next point. Because when I get closer to my goal, when I was saying earlier about that water retention that you can get from creatine, it fills up the muscle cells with more water, right? It all becomes psychological after that point. So when you're dialing in for something, right? If you're on a goal and you're trying to reduce your body fat, you want to make sure that all the changes you're making are working, right? Now, when you take creatine, because of the water retention, it becomes an extra variable that's very hard to track because creatine, much like your carb stores, you can deplete your creatine levels, which in turn, obviously, you'll then lose a bit of water retention, and then you replenish them when you take your creatine again. So all of a sudden, you've got another variable that is having an impact on your hydration levels within the cell. I'm not just talking about being hydrated or how much water you're drinking. I'm talking about hydration in the cell. When I get too close to whatever it is I'm dialing into, emotionally and mentally, I don't like added variables. I don't like stepping on the scales and going, the scales didn't budge, or they went up, or they did this. I like to streamline it. So for me personally, I utilize creatine up to a point and then I get rid of it. And after about a week or two, the water tension comes down. And then when I'm dialing in, I know that when I'm fasting or keeping my low carb or doing extra cardio or working harder, and even when I get a little small progress on the scales, because I know the target that I'm shooting for, I'm like, yep, that's real. That's not water tension based. That's not creatine levels fluctuating. That is real and it's easier to track. And that's because for me personally, when I get close to what I'm trying to do, I need that extrinsic motivation. I need to see the scale moving to keep me driving on through the hard times. So, what does that mean to anybody else losing weight? Well, I would say it all comes down to your emotional connection with the scale because it's very, very challenging to be sticking to a diet plan, doing your cardio, doing your workouts, and if you don't see movement on the scale, it can be quite demoralizing. Now, we know that if you're eating well, moving more, doing your workouts, right, you're going to be making changes to the body. So, a very, very strong, self assured person wouldn't concern themselves, and therefore they could take creatine, they could get the benefits to the workout to work out harder, and they wouldn't be relying on the scales to keep them lifted. That's not me. It's not a lot of people either, but it's certainly not me. So when I'm dialing in, when weight loss is the goal, I need to see the result clearer, which is the reason why I wouldn't use creatine when trying to dial in, not personally. My advice to anybody is if somebody's on a weight loss diet, if that's your main goal, if you can emotionally detach yourself from the scale, if you can be so assured that in what you're doing is getting your results, therefore you will, if what you're doing is getting your results and you don't need that, right? If even when you step on the scale, it's like, yeah, yeah, that's fine. Whether they fluctuate up or down, it doesn't bring your emotions up or down, then by all means use creatine because creatine would allow you to get a harder workout in. That harder workout, those extra reps will give you those extra gains. And if you're strong enough of mind to be like, that's okay because whatever the weight is, it's water weight from the creatine, and when you take it off, I'm making gains, then basically you'll be completely okay. So what it comes down to is your emotional attachment to the scales. So overall, if you had a long-term goal, let's just say you knew you had to drop 60 pounds, right? then you could utilize creatine to do it. If you thought, right, 60 pounds, because once you'd loaded up your creatine levels into the system, then as you're gradually losing weight anyway, you'll find that you'll still have a steady weight loss as the fat's coming off, and there'll be the odd fluctuation with water as you go, but ultimately you'll be coming down. But it's typically, I find, is when people get down close to the end game, they get very disheartened when they don't see a huge movement on the scales, and it just adds an extra variable. So if you can emotionally detach yourself from the scale and be very pragmatic about what you're doing, tracking everything, then basically you could then say, right, I will take creatine because it maximizes workouts. But I would say this, if you don't push yourself in your workouts, then what's the point? And you've got to be harsh with that. We know there's different types of workouts. Today I had a good workout on my shoulders. Right? I was testing out my shoulder and back, and I really did push myself. I was like, that was a good workout. I've had other workouts where I run through the motions. Where I do push myself to a certain extent, but not to the point where I'm really you know what I'm talking about. If you're being honest with yourself, you've got the workouts when you've really pushed yourself, and you've had the workouts where you've run through the program and you did what you had to do to get done. If you were being honest with yourself, if your main goal is just to get through a workout and you're not necessarily pushing yourself, then there's no real point taking creatine because the benefits you'll get from creatine is when you're able to push yourself. Why? Because creatine replenishes your ATP faster and allows you to push on more. If you're not trying to push yourself, you're not going to notice that benefit. This is why you typically find it in sports athletes or performance athletes because they're trying to get that extra rep. They're trying to increase the weight. They're trying to recover faster and reduce this and do that. So they do notice the benefits. When it comes to weight loss, and there's nothing wrong with this, with weight loss, you don't always have to be blasting your workouts to still get a really good result for reducing body fat. But if you want to get the benefits of creatine, you really want to be pushing your workouts to maximize it. So to summarize, if you are willing to push yourself on your training, creatine, yes. If you can emotionally detach yourself from the scales, then creatine with a push in the workout for weight loss, then yes. If you cannot emotionally detach from the scales, my recommendation would be is if you're going to take creatine, don't weigh yourself for 5 weeks or whenever you're on it, and then try again when you've come back off it, because then that way you're just going to add in something that's not going to be great for your mindset because your weight can fluctuate depending on the type. So there we go. Right, I'll go to the questions a few came in. Does the body get used to it and will it kind of lose the beneficial impact? Right. So the body, no, it doesn't get used to it. When you take creatine more often, you then eventually you fill up your creatine stores, if you like. There will be a maximum point in there, and then basically you'll hit your maximum threshold or saturation point for the creatine. Then it's fueling that creatine is fueling the energy system. Okay. So it's helping you with more carriers. People used to cycle their creatine often, and what cycling means is they might take it for 8 to 10 weeks and take breaks. There's lots of studies that have shown that you can virtually take creatine year round if you wanted to. I think I typically like to cycle them just because I don't like putting too many powders in my body. Right, I don't like the idea of the stress that powders and refined products do to your livers and kidneys. Now, whilst the studies have been done on creatine, it's not too detrimental. I just don't like doing it. So typically, I would then buy a tub of creatine. I work my way through the tub, and then when I'm done, I usually naturally take a break from it. One of the other reasons I cycle it occasionally, I don't always take it, is because I like to notice the benefit when it kicks back in. You take it for a while, you take a breather, and then you take it again, you're like, oh, put on a couple of pounds muscle, got a bit more reps in, all that kind of good stuff. So, but the studies are showing you can take it year round if you want to. Just keep it nice and simple. It is carriers, it's little buses for the spare phosphate that gets donated to help that energy system. But I will stress again, if you're not the type of person to push yourself in a workout, it's wasted on you, basically. You'll not get the full benefit. So it would be beneficial if my habits are spot on. It is beneficial not if I'm not pushing weightlifting wise really hard. Does that go right? If you're not pushing your workouts, if you're not trying to go for extra weight or extra reps or less recovery time, if you're not pushing or looking for progression within your workout. So sometimes people have their workout and they just like to work the muscles, and that's okay because you can still work muscles, get them burning, do what you need to do, and it'll get a good workout, and it'll still get you a weight loss goal. But if you want to get the real benefits of creatine, you want to be counting how many reps you can lift that weight for and trying to get an extra one or two out. And then it'll create overload in the muscle. And the next time you try it, you should be able to get more or longer and reduce rest time. So you want to really be pushing it to get the full benefits. Otherwise, you're just putting a powder in your body that's you're not going to get the full benefit from. Um, why you are taking it only 10 weeks? I read they take it longer. No, I was saying I take it for because I personally, oh well, 10 weeks. The reason I'm saying 10 weeks ties in with if I was dialing in for something 12 weeks down the line, I would take it for 10 and then I'd stop. So it would come out my system so that the water retention from it comes off. That's what I was trying to say earlier, Ariane. It was all based on mentally how you are emotionally attached to scales. Now, when I'm dialing in for something, I don't like too many variables, and that's me personal. And that's what I said at the start. That's me personally. I don't like too many variables when I'm dialing in for something. I'm okay in the early stage, hence why I said 10 weeks. But then when it gets closer to goal, if I'm dialing in for a posy photo shoot or something I need to kind of have abs out for or lower my body fat, I can't have any other variables. I can't step on the scales and then start thinking, is that the creatine? Is that the carbs? Is it this? Is it that? Am I dehydrated? Too much salt? There's too many variables. So I personally take the variables out of the equation, which is why I do it. But then what I said 2 or 3 minutes ago is that studies have shown they can take it year round for creatine if you can emotionally attach. Fundamentally, this live is about whether you should take creatine for weight loss or not. And I'm saying to keep it nice and simple, if you are not emotionally attached to the number on the scales and you push yourself in your workouts, then go for it. If either of those things are not true or they're not yes, if we're thinking in terms of circuits, if that's not a yes and that's not a yes, don't be it. Because if you are emotionally attached to the scales, creatine will mess with that number occasionally. So it's just no good. That'll mess with your head and your results will suffer for it because you'll likely fall off the wagon. If you're not going to push your workouts, again, you're wasting it. So it's got to be a yes. You've got to be push your workouts and not be emotionally attached number on scales. And if those two things are true, then you can get the added benefit and therefore long term get the results you're looking for. Um, if your body doesn't need more, does he only pee it out or is there a danger? I mean, generally what you'll find with creatine is, as I mentioned earlier, there's two main ways. People used to front load it or people just used to take it daily. But even those that front loaded it, they front loaded it for a week and then they go to the daily dose, right? Now, what happens is the general rule of thumb they say with creatine is that you take it every day. Like once, let's just assume whether you front loaded it or not, once you're on cycle, once you're taking it, you would take creatine every day. But the general rule of thumb is you take it every day and or you take it after exercise. And the reason for that is that when you've worked out resistance-based stuff or any sort of strenuous activity, you will have depleted your creatine stores. Why? Because creatine is used in the first 10 seconds of any exercise. So it makes sense to take your creatine right after your workout or after your workout, certainly. So let's just say on a Monday you take it first thing because nothing's happening on a Monday, but you work out on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. On Tuesday, take it after your workout, take it 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 12 a.m., doesn't matter after. Why? Because, oh, not 12 a.m., obviously 12 p.m., your workout would replenish and you'll top it back up. If you keep topping up when it's full, you will likely, I think, pee out the extra. It's just putting extra into your system. Yeah, your body will utilize creatine to up to its maximum point, and then you'll excrete the extra. They debunked all the damaging stories because there used to be people that would they would front load and then take lots and lots of creatine, and there was always the worry because creatine breaks down into creatinine, and creatinine is can be quite toxic to the kidneys. But they found that you'd have to be taking seriously excessive amounts of creatine for that to happen. So um, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Right. Any more questions? We're trying to keep all the questions on creatine if we can, Ariane. That's these lives are geared towards specific topics if we can, so people can catch them up later on. So, does anybody have any questions regarding creatine or the weight loss use of creatine or anything like that? Yeah, let me know if you've got one incoming. Remember as well, if you've got any other topics that you would like to be discussed on these lives, you can either hit up in the comments afterwards or at the time. I think the creatine one, why did that come in? Was that last week? Somebody mentioned it. But regardless, we've had electrolytes, we've had creatine mentioned now. What was the one we had before? We had, I can't remember. So it's quite nice. We try to keep very specific with the topic, so it's nice, clean cut on there. Any other questions at all before I leave you to your week? Anything creatine related, ideally? On creatine as well, remember there's different types of creatine, but the main one, don't mess around with fancy ones. Just get creatine monohydrate if that's what you decide. So if you're going to push yourself in your workouts and you're also then not emotionally attached to the scale, then creatine might be for you. And creatine monohydrate is the one that you want. And another top tip with that as well is you want to make sure that you don't buy the big fancy ones that adds a bunch of stuff and they try and convince you it gets to the muscles faster and all this jazz and they charge you triple the price. Don't. Creatine should not be expensive. It's been around for a while. You shouldn't spend more than 10 or 15 bucks on a month's supply or more. So you should be able to get it. And all these fancy ones just throw extra stuff in there. So perfect, Ariane. I'll ask my other questions in the app. So, Ariane, your questions as well, fire them in because if they're really good topic questions, I can use them potentially. I can expand on them for next week's lesson. So, what you could do as well is, yeah, absolutely ask them. And oh, where is it? We have to be the app group for this one. Yeah. If you got any questions, yeah, fire them in. But otherwise, you can comment on the video, and we could potentially use these for future things. All right, everybody, I will leave you to your week. Hope you have a good one. And as always, if you need anything, just get me on my socials. So there we are. Creatine monohydrate and weight loss. To summarize, if you want to push yourself in your workouts and you're not worried about the scales fluctuating because of the water retention, explain why, then creatine will definitely help your results because you can push your workouts, get more of your workouts, burn more fat, build more lean muscle, and get you to your goal. If you're too attached to the number on the scale, it's an added variable you don't need and it'll mess with your head. So I would say no. And if you don't push yourself in the workouts, I'd also say no as well because you're just wasting your money then. So that's my take on creatine. Have an awesome week, everybody. Speak to you soon. Bye bye.